Ladies and gentlemen, we're on day 168 of Russia's invasion and on the ninth year of Russian Federation's war against Ukraine. My name is Andriy Shevchenko. On behalf of the team of Mediacentrу Ukraine, I welcome all the journalists telling the world about our struggle for freedom. With us today is Ihor Ostash, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary in Lebanon. Your Excellency, hello. Slava Ukraini. In recent days, Mr. Ostash, among other things, has had to um, dedicate a lot of time to questions of the export of Ukrainian grain. So the first question then is about this. What is the news from the grain front? Well, there's different news. There's good news and bad news. I would like to perhaps start by saying that we finally concluded two epic uh, developments in Lebanon. One has been the events with the Syrian grain, which has been conducting stolen Ukrainian grain from Crimea to Tartus through Lebanon, or rather trying to convey it. And another series of events is Razoni, the ship, which was the first Ukrainian vessel, or rather, it was under the flag of Sierra Leone, but was the first vessel to have left the Odessa port and was moving to Tripoli in Lebanon. Finally, this vessel has reached Mersin in Turkey, which means that all of the problems around this vessel are now resolved. But I would like to point out that I do recall how hard it was on Saturday when the Razoni was supposed to reach Tripoli, and when a colleague of mine from the diplomatic corps, particularly with my work when we worked together in Canada, I wanted to say that this was the first time we had this kind of journalistic uproar in my life. We've had over 50 various media outlets to write about, to cover this event in the Tripoli port. Basically, all of the main world media agencies, TV channels, including from Africa and from obviously from the Arab world. Um, this was a moment when I sensed as an ambassador the extent to which Ukraine matters to the world, at least in the sense, or particularly in the sense of um, the overcoming the food crisis. And I wanted to say that really the slogan that we are spreading within the Ministry of Foreign Relations is Foreign Affairs is that Ukraine is saving the world. It's become a reality to me. It's really come home to me to see how much grain Ukraine exports to the Middle East and the African countries. If we come back to these specific stories that you started with, the story with the vessel with the stolen grain and the vessel with our Ukrainian grain uh, sold for export, what are the results? What are the conclusions that you've made for yourself? Well, that's an excellent question because yeah, these have been very important lessons, I would say, for the whole world because I'll start with the Laodicea, the Syrian ship. We have to understand that there's a criminal system at work that is constantly conveying stolen grain from Ukraine, sometimes going through Turkey, sometimes directly to Syria, sometimes to other countries of the Middle East. But this is the kind of scheme that, of course, Russia's occupational authority are involved in. Of course, the Syrian Russian vessels, but not only them. Overall, the list of vessels that convey stolen grain from Ukraine numbers 87 vessels. And we found out that Laodicea was on this list, and we're constantly working with our raiders around the sea traffic, naval traffic in Lebanon. So we finally tracked Laodicea near Tripoli, even though it was supposed to be moving to Tartus. Nevertheless, it came to Tripoli. And so our team, which had learned by now to work with cases like this, because we wouldn't allow. It's been now about a dozen times that we have disallowed other vessels to come to Lebanon, and we immediately jumped to work. And what worked is we managed to arrest the vessel first for 72 hours, and then we extended for another 72 hours, so basically 144 hours altogether. And there was, of course, a criminal investigation opened after our suit, and of course a civil complaint. So we really were kind of pioneers. We hadn't had much experience about the possibility of um, seeing this grain, but we tried to talk to the uh, Attorney General and the Agrarian Ministry. And the main conclusion that we could draw from this story, I would say, is that we tried to accuse many vessels, but we didn't have the evidence, unfortunately. And this is that time where the surgeon has finally opened the cavity, the body, and we see this criminal swelling. We saw the proof that this was grain. This was 8,000 tons of grain. It was ground at the Krasnogordisk elevator in Crimea, which is well known to us, to those of us who are in the grain business. So, and then obviously the puzzle came together, and we presented these stories to the association, the producers of this grain. And one of the cases led by the Attorney General's office was dedicated specifically to the case when the occupation authorities ordered grain being taken from Berdyansk to the Krasnogordisk elevator. And so when we saw this 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 bag of grain from Crimea, we understood that this is exactly what we were looking for. And I can say that our opponents immediately sense that we've caught them red-handed, and there was an immediate response from the Syrian authorities, from the Russian authorities, from the Russians, who did all they could, including using Lebanese politicians. They're the Lebanese politicians who are close to Russia or who have Russian ties, and there was immediate decision to send this vessel away. However, I wanted to say that this was also a great victory for us in the sense that we not allowing this ship to come in Lebanon and to be it was we didn't allow them to use the cargo for the Lebanese businessmen. Now again, it wasn't Lebanon. It wasn't Lebanon, the state, that ordered this grain. Essentially, it was an order by business structures. And as we summed up, this vessel that had been planning to make a killing in Lebanon to make to has was forced to move from Lebanon to Tartus. And then we also did a lot of other investigations, and we found out that all the documents that the Russians said they had were faked, were forged, particularly the certificates that looked particularly poor. But we showed that these title certificates are forged because they were written for a port in Beirut and Tripoli, although again the vessel said it was going to Tartus. As- uh, uh, Sir, if this is systemic, if we're talking about systemic, if we're talking about dozens of ships that might be involved, what can be done with this? What ought to be done with this? What can be the role of Turkey in this story? A great question. So we understand that it's very difficult to hide evidence. in the world, in this modern world. We immediately turned to our diplomatic partners in various embassies, and 4 countries immediately provided us satellite imagery from this vessel in Feodosia, where it was picking up its cargo, in spite of the vessel's claims. But it was immediately clear that it had picked up its cargo in the Crimea. As far as Turkey is concerned, of course, there is a serious problem because we've seen the first experience. There was the holdup with of a ship in Ankara. That was the first kind of alarm bell. The first ship was detained, but we didn't manage to make full use of it. But practically, what happens is that there are many companies, in between companies, usually owned by Syrians. In this case, too, by the way, the intermediary company called Loyal Agro, it's a Turkish company, and we all first thought it was the Turks doing. And I spoke to my colleague in Ankara, Vasil Bodnar, and we were trying to cooperate. He was going through the foreign ministry, but it turned out that the owner was Syrian. So essentially, Syrians registered their company in Turkey and are trying to do all they can to pull off the subterfuge, to hide the traces of transporting stolen grain. So we're working with the Turks now, even here with the Turkish embassy in Beirut, to really see what's going on and what companies are involved in the story. So wheels are in motion. Um, Obviously, we have to work very closely with Turkey because we have many suspicions about many things being hidden in Turkey. We also have to understand another important thing. Yeah, okay. The, I wanted to ask about. You told us there was great attention of the media to the ship with Ukrainian grain that let you feel the significance of Ukraine. Could you tell us, in the system of food security, what you see in Lebanon, what is the significance of this Ukraine in Lebanon, in terms of what you see in Lebanon or in the Middle East? So I wanted to just to finish the previous idea, which is, so what do we do in these instances? Obviously, it's very important to turn to the international naval law, um, that pick up their cargo in Crimea, that follow these routes. They turn off their AIC, their transponders, their to be invisible, and this is already a signal that perhaps an illegal business is going on to to avoid responsibility. So there's been a proposal to work with all these rules that exist in the international seafaring rules to put obstacles in place. But to come back to your question about good developments, well, how serious how seriously are Africa and the Middle East dependent on Ukraine? We're talking about 450 million, even 500 million, basically half a billion people on the planet are dependent on Ukraine, on Ukrainian grain, on Ukrainian produce, on Ukrainian food. Um, when we take take Lebanon, for instance, uh, it's almost 80% dependent on Ukraine. So last year, Lebanon was buying grain to make bread in Ukraine, and which was 80% of the entire extent of their entire grain imports. And now imagine that the Black Sea is blocked and these delivery routes are threatened. And Lebanon finds itself in a very difficult economic situation, not only with bread, with grain, but they start looking for alternative routes or alternative countries. Um, Moreover, the World Bank allocates $150 million to Lebanon to buy grain because the situation is extremely difficult. And I should say that we immediately responded to this situation. I've conducted numerous conversations with the Lebanese Ministry for Economy and also with our Ministry for Agricultural Policy, and we managed to institute a meeting between the heads of the interstate Ukraine-Lebanon committee, um, Minister Solsky on our side, and the Lebanese Minister for Economy, Amin Salah. Amin Salam. So this was a very productive conversation between leaders of important institutions, and we agreed to support the movement of grain to Lebanon. Basically, as soon as we retook the Snake Island, um, this immediately opened a canal that takes our ships through the Danube. It became a lot more productive. And essentially, Ukraine now sends 1 to 2 vessels per week to Lebanon with wheat, with corn, and of course sunflower oil. There are Ukrainian companies that work uh, quite a lot in this regard, particularly the Dnipro Agricultural Company, and of course the Lebanese are very grateful that we've managed, in spite of the blockade of Odessa, that we managed to send them these cargoes with Ukrainian grain. When we talk about this big vessel Razoni, it was perhaps it made quite a buzz because it was large. We're talking about 26,000 tons of corn. Because we send small ships from Ismail, but nevertheless they also affect the situation and they help Lebanon survive these difficult months of the Russia's aggression in Ukraine. Now there's a new hope, not only for Lebanon but also for other countries as well. We understand that there are many problems. Everybody, I keep getting asked, why is Razoni not taking off its cargo in Lebanon? And it's a very simple reason, which is business. We have to understand that most of the vessels that are loaded with the grain in Odessa are not Ukrainian state-owned. There's always acts of God. There's always contracts that are held to or not held to. Particularly that many of these contracts were signed prior to the war. So the instance of Razoni is the same sort of story. The contract was signed 5 months ago, and of course the owner, or rather the Lebanese business that ordered this vessel, had refused. And of course it's their right. So we lost perhaps this very interesting opportunity to show the world how important this is, because we really expected that these 50 TV cameras would show to the world how Ukrainians have helped, in this case, Lebanon, but not only Lebanon. On the other hand, we are happy that this vessel is now in a Turkish port in Mersin, and that this problem is finally resolved. And we continue working. And believe me, uh, Andriy, there are 2 more vessels going from Iran to Lebanon. So this assistance to the Middle East is continuing, and we keep controlling all of these different routes so that they conclude successfully, and this Ukrainian grain and Ukrainian foods reach their destination. Thank you. With us was Ihor Ostash, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary to Lebanon, a politically complex country, geographically very important country, and thirsting for Ukrainian grain and Ukrainian harvest, Ukrainian foods. Your Excellency, thank you for this conversation. Thank you very much. Again, thank you for this cooperation on the diplomatic level. I hope we will continue. Slava Ukraini. Героям слава. Thank you. And with Ukraine.